Hello friends, welcome back to Hello Friends, the Mr. Robot Review Show. I am your host, Kyle, as always. Thank you for joining me. I am recording these back to back. So this is episode 14 of Hello Friends Officially, Season 2, Episode 4. Again, please watch the other 13 episodes if you haven't seen it so far. The format is a little bit different in terms of the editing, so I'm kind of still messing around with that, but I hope you guys will enjoy. We're going to review every episode of Mr. Robot. This is number 14. Out of 46, I believe. So we're chugging along, but yeah, we're just gonna get into it. Okay, so the plot is an illusion. Episode 14, I'm calling this one Walking Shadow, and we are gonna find out why towards the end of this episode. But we begin here, picking up right where we left off at the end of episode 13. Elliot, where he says he's gonna hack the FBI. Hype moment here. Well, it turns out he is doing exactly that. There's a bunch of window prompts here. Elliot is hacking the FBI. He goes, step 1, identify the target and its flaws. There are always flaws. He goes, I learned that early in life. And this is where we find out his first ever hack was actually at the public library. He goes, step 2, build malware and plan an attack. And he says here, the pragmatic expression of my will. He goes, I live for this shit. So Hacker Elliot is really like, he's been missing this, and this is what he does best. Step 3, he says, the stage 2 exploit. Load the malware to my personal cell that will intercept all data. He says, should the FBI try and take an image of the code, all data will self-corrupt or explode. And I was like, damn. Elliot's really, he's covered all his tracks. He is the mastermind, and he knows how exactly what to do. Step 4, he says, write a script. And he says, I know exactly when, where, and how it's going to run. And then he says, step 5, launch the attack. So a cool montage here of Elliot doing all the prompts here, and the music's going, and the lights all kind of come down on him, and it's just him and the screen. He does say, the thrill of pwning a system, it's the greatest rush. He says that feeling never gets old. There's a brief scene where the lights come on. The bodyguard that's standing there is like asking him like, how's it going or whatever, and Elliot says, oh, we need the old IT guy Artie. He says there's an encrypted database, and he's like, all right, I guess I'll talk to Artie and see what he knows. So the bodyguard leaves, the lights go back off, and it's just the silhouette of Elliot there on the computer. We slowly fade out to the Mr. Robot title card. So we cut to Dom visiting what is now known as Steel Valley, formerly known as Steel Mountain here. They're rebranding after like the attack. And the guy's like, oh, Dom, what do you think of the new name? And she's like, honestly, it's pretty terrible. And I was like, exactly. Steel Valley isn't great. Maybe change it from Steel, but that's the whole branding. So I don't know. That's tricky. But she's taken to the thermostat that Elliot hacked when he went in there, when he ran into Tyrell Wellick in the bathroom, blah, blah, blah. But that's kind of cool to throw it back to the first season. We then go to Angela's apartment where Darlene is waiting. Apparently it's been 5 weeks since they've seen each other. She's like, yo, I just got into your apartment. Like, your security's not very good. But she's like, that's cool. I did all what I needed to do anyway. And Angela's like, what's going on here? Darlene says, okay, I know you're going to freak out, but I need you to do something for me. I need you to drop a device at the FBI building so they can hack the FBI. She says like 23rd floor or something. She's like, go in there, put the device on the ground, and leave. And Angela starts to freak out, and Darlene's like, I knew this was going to happen. But she's like, okay, but she's like, take your chances. But she's like, I hope for your sake, like, no one else knows about that CD, the CD that Cisco gave them. We go to Joanna. She meets with their informant, Kareem. And, he says, I know someone's watching me. He's like, I just have a feeling. He's like, I lied to the FBI. He's like, I don't want to do this anymore. He's freaking out. This has been building for a couple episodes now. Joanna's like, I promise you everything will be okay. And in parentheses, I put in here, somehow I don't believe her. So Dom shows up at the FBI building. There's like a dude hanging out there, and she's like, excuse me, sir, you can't be over here. He's like, I work here. She's like, not on this floor, you don't. And she like tells the guy to leave. And she says, I hate coming here. Security is so lax. And I'm like, oh, that's a big point. The FBI building doesn't have the best security, which seems weird, but obviously Angela needs to get in there to drop the device. We find out from Dom, the security sucks here. It's like, that's a big point. Her coworker is talking about a dream she had, and she's like, you don't really dream, do you? To Dom, and Dom says, it never interested me. And this is cool because this kind of goes on the theme from last week about dreams, and where Leon's telling Elliot, do you dream? You got to fight for your future. So interesting that it kind of picks up here in the next episode. So Darlene goes to see Elliot at his house. She says, you need to talk to Angela. She goes, she's our only option. Elliot says, she's not an option. Think of something else. He's like, I did my part, but think of any other option. That's a quick scene there. We go to Dom, who shows up in China with Mr. Santiago to meet with Chinese Minister of State Secretary Zi Zhang. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but played by BD Wong, who we know as White Rose, so it's nice that we get to see him here. We've only seen him a couple times meeting with like Philip Price. So obviously BD Wong has the White Rose persona, and he's transgender, so he's also got the Minister Zhang, who is the Minister of State Security. So that's a big deal. But it's nice to see BD in this form here, because we have seen a lot of White Rose time so far, not a lot as Mr. Zhang there. So Santiago requests that they can visit all 4 backup facilities after the attack and be granted access to the encrypted E-Corp servers. BD Wong says, of course, no problem. And he goes, Mr. Santiago says, there's one more sensitive subject to discuss, and Dom's like, oh, the Dark Army? She's like, oh yeah, we need the Dark Army, they're a malicious hacking group, we'd like to know everything you have on them. And of course, White Rose being the leader of the Dark Army, BD Wong, Dom doesn't know that. He's like, who is this? Like, he doesn't say that, but he's like, he just looks at Dom, and everyone's kind of uncomfortable because they're like, Dom, you can't just be saying that. I put on my notes here, look out, Dom. Dom just says we won't reveal all information they have. They're a known malevolent hacker group. Mr. Zhang is like, of course. And he just smiles, but there's like a long pause, and you can tell he's on. BD is like on Dom at this point. And as we saw from last week's episode, when White Rose was talking to Philip Price, they're already investigating Dom DiPiero. So they already have a file open. And so this is like putting White Rose or putting Mr. Zhang on an even higher alert that Dom is going to be a problem. So we cut to the basketball court where Ray, Elliot, and Mr. Robot are meeting. Ray is like, you really need RT, who's the previous hacker guy. He's like, I thought you were a master hacker. Elliot's like, I wouldn't ask if there was another way. Ray says, RT and I didn't exactly end on the best of terms. And Mr. Robot says, we're wasting time that we don't have. He's like, you need to call Angela. That's just a quick scene. And then we cut to Joanna and Mr. Wellick's right-hand man, which I'm sorry, I still don't know the name of. I probably should have looked up again. But the main guy, the henchman of Mr. Wellick and now of Joanna. It's revealed that Kareem, who's the informant they were talking to, he was killed via injection. And there's like a montage scene where Joanna's holding her baby, and she's like, and Kareem, did you do what I asked? And he's like, yes. And there's like a cutback scene, attempted B&E, where the henchman goes in there wearing like a terrible disguise where he's just got like a jacket and a hat on. But he goes in there, he injects Kareem immediately in the neck for something that paralyzes him completely, but his mind is still awake. And then it turns out that, he breaks all the shit. He's like sitting there, he eventually shoots him in the chest and then in the head. And he goes, ma'am, I need to ask, like, why drug him in the first place? Why not just shoot him? And Joanna says, shooting him just instantly robs him of any thought process. She's like, we drugged him because even though he's completely paralyzed, his mind is still active. So we're letting him die with answers. He still has time to process everything and why his life is ending. And she goes, other than that, we're nothing but ruthless murderers. And I was like, that doesn't make you any better, Joanna. But it's really cool because she says this while she's holding her baby. The henchman is kind of like doubting, like, dude, I work for 2 psychopaths. And it's cool because we thought that Tyrell was the crazy one. And Joanna was kind of like the steady hand. But now it turns out Joanna might be even crazier than Tyrell. So she's power hungry and willing to do anything, go to any lengths, really, just as much as Tyrell, if not more. Angela then meets up with Ollie at a bar, and this is such a cringy scene. And Ben Rappaport shows back up here as Ollie. He's like, hey, thought I'd never see you. And he's like, oh yeah, that spot over there, that's where I said the 3 magic words. And Angela's like, I'm sorry, I don't. And he goes, I love you. And he's like, I miss you. And she goes, thanks. And it's really, their interaction is great because Ollie's always been like in love with Angela, even though he treats her like shit and cheats on her. And Angela like just can see right through him now. And she's like, dude, get over yourself. But he's like, I hope this isn't weird, but I brought my resume. And she's like, and I put in my notes here, Ollie sucks so hard. And she's like, that is weird, dude. He's like, just want to see what's out there. So he's trying to get a job at E-Corp now. And she's like, she notices something weird. Angela notices something weird. The phone is like in the middle of the table, but it's face down. But like he's drinking half her beer and Angela hasn't taken a sip yet, but she looks at it and then she takes the phone and it turns out he's recording the conversation. She's like, what the hell, man? She's like, are you working with the FBI? And she's like, have you talked to the FBI? He's like, no. Okay, yes. And I'm like, dude, Ollie's the worst. So she puts his phone in the beer. Actually, that's a good scene. And he's like, come on, man, I can't afford a new phone. And I'm like, oh, you suck so bad. Ollie's the worst is what I put in here. But he does reveal that he did a facial composite sketch for Cisco. And Angela's just like, this is stupid, and walks away. So Dom is at the party over in China. She's looking for a bathroom, and she gets lost. She asks one gentleman, bathroom, and he doesn't speak English. And she's like, okay. So she's like, I'm just going to start opening doors. She stumbles upon Minister Zhang's clock room. This is a super, super cool sequence here. So there's all these clocks and the ticking and the sound design is really cool. All these different types of clocks. There's digital clock. There's a bunch of old clocks. And then Mr. Zhang actually shows up and he says, pardon me, do you have the time? And she's like, oh, she like startles him. And he says, you've wandered very far from the party. And this is a great sequence here where Dom is like, oh, my parents got the same clock from Kmart for like $10 because Mr. Zhang says it's like a one of a kind. He was sold it, and he's like, well, she's like, you got duped then because like my parents got the same one for like $10. But they have like a really, really awesome sequence where they start talking. Dom gives up so much information, and I'm like, why is she so comfortable here? But obviously at this point she doesn't know that White Rose or Mr. Zhang is the head of the Dark Army. They have a conversation where Zhang says, life is but a walking shadow. Because she says, what's up with all the clocks? And he says, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then it is heard no more. And Dom says, you've surrounded yourself with a constant reminder of mortality. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Like, it's true. I mean, he's so obsessed with time. Time is the only thing that reminds us that kind of we are mortal. So it's like, it's sort of crazy and really morbid. But BD Wong, or Mr. Zhang, says, as each second passes, I push myself to keep moving. This kind of reminded me of Elliot's struggles here, where Elliot always has got to keep moving and finding a reason. Last episode where he needs to fight for his future, find out what he's fighting for. It looks like BD Wong is doing the same thing with his character here. So Minister Zhang shows Dom a picture in his office about the loss of identity, which is important because obviously the idea of identity is really important to the whole show, as the show as a whole, of course, but also White Rose and Mr. Zhang. It's a split identity, just similar to Elliot Scott with him and Mr. Robot, and just that's, you can tell it's not just Minister Zhang. There's a whole identity crisis going on there, really. But Dom reveals here, that she was in her final year of law school because he's like, how'd you get into the FBI? And she says, I thought I was with the one. He got on one knee and proposed, and I just went to the bathroom and never came back. So she got cold feet, and then she just broke up and joined the FBI. She's like, I can't believe I'm telling all this to the Minister of State Security. She's like, it will make a great story at Thanksgiving. And I put in my notes here that Dom shines here. This whole sequence, she's great. Zhang then shows Dom the closet, and he says, I want to show you something. And he brings her over to his closet. He says, these are my favorite dresses, and he puts 2 on the doors there, and she's like, wow, these are so beautiful. She's like, where did these come from? And he's like, oh, these are my sisters. He's like, she visits sometimes when she comes to Beijing. and Dom like knows that he doesn't have a sister. So she looks at him and she's like growing concerned, like, oh, she can kind of see what's going on here. Like he's clearly covering up something. Zhang then asks Dom, do you know what the world would look like if the 5/9 hack never happened? And Dom just kind of like gives him a stare, and he says, some believe there are alternate realities playing out that very scenario. He says, other people that we've become. And he says, the contemplation moves me very deeply. And then the clock strikes 12 or strikes midnight, and time is up. And I was like, what a sequence, dude. It's this early idea that White Rose is obsessed with other realities, which we'll find out about, and the idea of time, and how this isn't the only reality or the only universe. So that's gonna go. That's kind of a big mythical idea of the show, especially around White Rose's character. So that's really, really cool that we get a little glimpse into that here in episode 14. So Angela then goes to see Elliot at his house. She's like, okay, so all I have to do is put a device on the floor and you guys make everything go away, right? Elliot's like, well, we hope so, but it's not necessarily that simple. And she's like, look, I wanted to wait to see you because I know you wouldn't involve me unless you were sure you could pull it off. And Elliot's kind of quiet. And she's like, I made my decision. She's like, I'm in. And then Angela says, I missed you, Elliot. She's like, I reached out to you many times and you keep saying no. Can I just know why? And Elliot says he keeps thinking back to the train sequence we saw them in season 1, where he told me to take care of myself. And he says, I want to stop seeing him before I saw you again. And she's like, and he goes, well, my dead father is standing behind you right now. And it's a shot of Mr. Robot there. Angela turns around. There is no Mr. Robot, so only Elliot can see Mr. Robot here. And into my notes here, I put, who the heck is sitting in the rocking chair in the living room? Every scene in this house that we've seen in season 2, there's like Elliot or the guest, and then behind them is a TV and someone rocking in a chair. And it's very clear there's someone there because there's like a silhouette. And I don't know who this is. I don't know if we ever find out, but like someone is sitting in the chair with Elliot, and I don't know if it's just a home and Elliot's like renting with someone else or what happens, but I think there's purpose to that, and I don't know who it is. So I'm hoping we find that out at some point. Darlene then is meeting with this dude who's kind of like, I think the guy was taking the pictures with like the balls and all that before. She's like, hey, I want you to lead the DC op. And this guy's like, seriously? She's like, yeah, go ahead. Like be a leader and do it. And then he's like, well, I won't let you down. I'm so thankful. And she's like, okay. Her phone rings. Darlene's like, do your job and stop acting like such a pussy. I gotta take this. Classic Darlene. And she takes the call. This is where we find out that RT is the dude that Ray beat the shit out of. Because RT goes to, in front of his family, RT goes to help Elliot, and he starts like entering the prompts on the thing there, and Elliot says to us, this guy knows his shit, so why did Ray come to me? And then they use Notepad to have a conversation, like a silent convo, which is neat. So like basically the guy's typed in Notepad, Elliot's reading it, and then he's typing more, and they're all doing this in silence. Eventually, RT puts in the login information for the site that Ray hosts, and then he walks away. He's like, oh, you're all set. He's like, let me know if you need anything. He's like, all right, man. But in the Notepad, he's saying like, this is bad. This is really bad. So he walks away. Elliot logs in, and it turns out that Ray is part of the dark market. He's hosting a site for the dark market where it involves human trafficking, including minors. There's a 17-year-old girl who's like tied up, and it's really messed up. There's a hitman position, and then there are some hard drugs that are being sold. So Ray is not as nice as we thought. Elliot actually talks to Mr. Robot afterwards. He says, Ray is protective and kind, and then he's also a criminal and dangerous. And he goes, maybe those are his two sides. And they have a back and forth here with Ray and Mr. Robot, and he's like, look, Elliot tells Mr. Robot, if he's guilty, I could destroy him in under 2 minutes. Mr. Robot's like, this isn't a coffee shop owner. So flashback to the pilot with Ron's Coffee. He's like, just forget what you saw and move on. And Elliot says, I'm thinking of those people, the people in those pictures. He's like, we could help them. And Mr. Robot says, we have other battles to fight. And Elliot says, what else is new? And this is interesting because it seems like Mr. Robot's trying to get away from the hacker persona from Elliot, but Elliot actually seems like he wants to help people who are in danger here and stop the dark web, which he was kind of doing before, where he was like hacking, like the guy cheating on Krista and other people like that. But Mr. Robot is like, we can't go back down that road. So we cut to Joanna. She gets a call from someone breathing into the phone. We think this is Tyrell, but she says, Tyrell, please say something. And it's just breathing and breathing, and no one says anything. Ambulances race by. Joanna like runs outside to look down the street. Something is definitely going on here. Angela then shows up at the Smart House, where Darlene and F Society are hanging out now for their new headquarters after the arcade. Angela shows up and meets Darlene at the door, and she says, did you follow the route I sent you? And Angela says yes, and she's like, where's your cell phone? And Angela says it's at home. And Darlene says, okay, no more bullshit from this point out. Angela says okay, and then she actually brings Angela up to the F Society hackers. So she brings her into the group, and this is a big deal. Angela's being like brought into F Society now, and she's ready to help out, and it's huge that Darlene's letting her meet everyone. So we cut back to Dom, who is talking to her coworker, the same one she was talking to Dreams about earlier. She's like, last night I had a private tour from Minister Zhang. It was kind of weird because he showed me his sister's dresses, and she's like, oh, that is weird. And Dom's like, yeah, what's even weirder is that he doesn't have a sister, which at this point in the episode, we didn't know until just now that Dom knows that. And Dom and the coworker go down to get some fruit, and oh fuck, we have a shooting here. This poor coworker is done for. So that was apparently her only episode because she gets shot immediately. There's two guys that break in, start shooting, everyone gets wrecked. I did not remember this scene, so I was like, came by surprise. This is the last few minutes of the episode here. Dom scurries behind a desk. One of the guys that dies, he kind of stumbles over. She takes his gun. She shoots one of the assailants in the leg there. Then she goes back behind the desk because he's shooting, and she goes back out to shoot him in the head, and the guy actually turns the gun on himself and shoots himself. Kind of reminds me of, we just did Captain America in review, kind of reminds me of the Hydra informant, where he eats the, I can't think of the drug right now, but he kills himself before revealing any information or before he can be tortured. And this is really similar, where the Dark Army agents are so loyal that if they have an opportunity that they might die, they don't know, he doesn't know if Dom's gonna like hold her up with a gun and then take her captive, so he takes his own life there to make sure that no information can be revealed. But there is still one more gunman, and she goes behind the desk, and he goes over, he starts shooting, and she hides behind the desk, and she's getting like that flashbang moment where the hearing, it's like that high-pitched scream, or the high-pitched sound, I should say, and it's kind of left on a cliffhanger because she's hiding behind the desk, and there's still one more guy to take out, and we don't know if Dom's going to make it through that. We then cut to Elliot, who is pulled out of bed. He's kidnapped. A couple of bodyguards. It turns out he's brought outside, and it's the bodyguard from earlier, for Ray's bodyguard. And he's like, man, you should never trust a tech guy with a rat tail. And he like opens his handkerchief, and he takes the rat tail that's like connected to obviously a piece of skin that was ripped off, and he drops it on the ground there, indicating that this dude is very dead. And then Ray gets out of the van. Elliot's like, Ray, what are you doing? And Ray just says, told you not to look. Beat the piss out of Elliot. We get a slow zoom in on the rat tail. That dude is dead. Cut to black. Okay, so for this score, I'm going to give it an 8.3. I thought overall this was sort of like a filler episode, if you can have one in Mr. Robot. The ending is great. I forgot about the shootout at the end. The whole sequence with Dom and BD Wong, incredible. Really like the meat of the episode, and like that whole sequence is incredible. I actually remembered most of that sequence there, unfortunately, but it was still like the acting between BD Wong and Dom and Grace Gummer as Dom, just so good. And it's like 1 and 1A for them for who carries the episode there. We see less of Elliot, so that's a nice change. Mr. Robot's like barely in this episode. We get a little bit more of Ray, but yeah, I just think not much happens in this episode. We get Elliot continuing the hack. We get Angela, who is involved. So little moments that are gonna end up being big down the end or down the stretch. But the big sequence in the middle of the episode really is Dom and BD Wong, and how, you know, these two, it's really the two heads going at each other, where Dom with the FBI, who's investigating Dark Army, has no idea that she's talking to the Minister Zhang is also White Rose, so she has no idea that she's, you know, chasing BD Wong right in front of her. And it's like, but she probably thinks something is up now when he's telling her, like, you know, these are my sister's dresses. Oh, you don't have a sister. But she doesn't necessarily probably connect that to White Rose. She probably just thinks, you know, this is a transgender individual, or he's hiding something. But that'll be interesting to see where it goes. But then I'm sure Dom is going to know if she gets out of it alive here. I mean, they just sent hitmen after her while she's visiting, and the night after she meets with Minister Zhang. So I'm sure she's going to start to connect the dots there. It's a little strange that the Dark Army sent hitmen after Dom right after. Like, you think they would wait or see if they can maybe plan their attack a little bit better. But maybe this is Dark Army unraveling a little bit, so we'll see. But yeah, I thought a lot of it, a good episode for sure, but I think a lot of it was kind of stagnant and kind of sewed those deeper threads that will pay off in the long run. So 8.3 I think is a good score. And for the first time in Hello Friends, the White Rose goes to Grace Gummer as Dom DiPiero. Dom, I thought, just killed this episode. Not only is she looking good, Grace Gummer, man, I love that look as Dom. She is an attractive woman for sure. But no, her acting is amazing. And she really, this episode is all about Dom. And she was just so comfortable around BD Wong, and it was so nice seeing their interaction, because they were both so good in that scene. And you can see that BD Wong really opens up to Dom in a way that probably doesn't happen very often. So it was really nice to see how comfortable Dom is, and how confident she is as an FBI agent, and how she's going on, how things will shape up now if she gets out of that mess with the hitman. We'll see. But I just think Grace Gummer just plays the role of Dom DiPiero so well, and I think she just really was the star of the show here throughout the whole sequence at the party, and her interrupting the conference to say, Dark Army, we need to know about Dark Army, and then the BD Wong sequence, and then just her skills too. She's very capable with a gun, and you can tell she is kind of ruining the rest of the plot for both Dark Army and Elliot and Mr. Robot. So or I should say F Society. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Grace Gummer, first White Rose for her. Maybe there'll be more to come. I'm sure she's a very talented actress, so we'll have to see. Okay, guys, so that's it. That is episode 14 of Hello Friends. 4 episodes down in season 2, so season 2 I know is a little bit longer. I think it's 12 episodes. I'll have to check as we get closer, but yeah, again, super fun time doing this. Thank you guys so much for joining. Again, I'm going to post this back to back with episode 13 so we can get back on track here. And I'm going to try not to miss any more weeks going forward. So every Saturday there should be a new Hello Friends. If you like the content, please subscribe, like, comment. Please tell your friends to get into Mr. Robot if they haven't. Mr. Robot is such a great show, I think. Even if you're not really into hacking, or it's just such a well-made show. And the characters and the performances are so good throughout the series. So hopefully spread the word. And until next time, goodbye, friends.